The only thing that's going to happen to prices in Toronto is they're going to go up. That's
Yeah.
the only thing that's going to happen. There's absolutely no situation where it's going to change. I'll give you an example. I fully expect a 500 square foot apartment to be priced at $1 million in like 5 years.
Welcome to the Tom Storey Show with Steve Karrasch and Tom Storey, where we discuss everything real estate or whatever else is on our minds.
Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Tom Storey Show, your weekly real estate roundup podcast. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to hit that like button and join our community by also subscribing. Our goal is to get to 2,000 subscribers by the summer, and we are very much in spring now, so we appreciate if you're doing that, if you're coming back every single week. And if you're listening on the audio platforms that you haven't already, make sure to go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review. We've got a very special guest this week. Brad Lamb is joining us. Brad Lamb is a Canadian real estate broker, brokerage owner, and condominium developer, building up really most of King West. Brad, like, you're responsible for most of King West being built up. I know a bit on the design district as well on the east side. I'd say you were basically the OG of real estate reality shows as well. I think you were the first to that, and a lot of people are making big platforms off what you had started. So maybe we'll get into that today. You've also been responsible for, I think, over 130 condo launches, not just the ones that you've built through Lamb Development Corp, but even before that as well. And your marketing has got you on platforms as big as the Ellen DeGeneres Show. You're an influential and vocal figure in the Canadian real estate market, and we are proud to have you here. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. I think a lot of our audience is kind of split. On the YouTube side, we got a lot of consumers. And then on the audio side, we have a lot of the real estate industry. So who's Brad Lamb? Like, if you can give us a 2-minute, like, where did you start? How did we get to where we are today?
Well, that's so I would say who I am is a very competitive, you know, individual in every category of life, right? So when I was a kid, I was an athlete, and I played hockey to a pretty high level, and I was a competitive swimmer at a pretty high level, and I played football and soccer, and I was a runner, and I also was a very competitive student. So I did very well in school, and but part of all that is doing the work, right? Like,
Yeah.
people have natural ability and perhaps a natural level of intelligence, but without being competitive and wanting to achieve, often it just sort of goes away, right? It just doesn't get developed. So I went to engineering school in Queens, and I got an engineering degree. And after I did that, I worked for a few years in that capacity, and it didn't really offer a ton of excitement for me. I also should say that I'm also sort of a natural salesman. It came very easily to me, and throughout my childhood, when I was 6 and 7 to 12, I was always selling stuff, door to door, or at the end of my street, or having block parties and stuff like that. So so I didn't really want in the end to be an engineer. It wasn't kind of my dream. So I loved real estate. I was very early onto it, and I got my real estate license, and started selling real estate for. I think I was 27 when I got my real estate license. And I started selling real estate, and pretty quickly, was a top agent in the city. I would say within about a year, I was one of the top people selling real estate. And within 4 years, I was making over $1 million a year selling real estate.
And that just all came now. Was this in Toronto, by the way, or did you start elsewhere?
Yeah, no, it was. I started selling real estate, condos. I focused on condos. I was one of the few people
Yeah.
that did, and again, that competitive nature. Like, I just I wouldn't let anyone take anything from me, and I think that if you're competitive and you're focused, then there's really nothing you can't accomplish. People will tell you can't do things,
Right. You just don't
but
listen to them. Yeah, you just do it.
yeah, if you're a competitive spirit and you're focused and you believe in what you're doing, I don't think anyone can stop you.
Why did you start with condos? Because I'd say you got on condos long before it was cool to sell condos, especially in this city. And when you started, I'm sure the selling price of condos were in the 100s and 200s. Like why did you start there?
Yeah. So what happened was prior to becoming a real estate agent, I started buying real estate as an investor. And I mean, I've told this story so many fucking times, but anyway, first property I bought was about $30,000 in London. I brought it with my two brothers. I put up to around like $1,200 or $1,500. It wasn't a lot. My older brother put up the same. My younger brother, my dad loaned him the money. He was still in university. I think I was 24 at the time. And it was really me leading all this, not my other brothers. They didn't really give a shit about that. But I talked about it. We bought a townhouse. And then I sold the townhouse a year or two later for about twice what I paid for it, right? So we had like 5,000, and then we had $30,000.
Right.
And by the way, I was making 22 or 24,000 a year as an engineer. So it was like a whole year's money in one transaction. So I promptly went off and I bought four more townhouses in London. The first property was in London, Ontario, because my younger brother's going to Western. And then, you know, I over the 3-year period, I went on a wild acquisition spree and buying stuff with no money down. Like it was easier then, you know.
Right.
We hit BTBs and I bought apartment buildings and commercial plazas, and it's just like way beyond what I should have been doing. But and I was making pretty good money doing that, buying, fixing up, selling. And then one day I asked my realtor, who I used very loyally in London. He was a good guy, and he always called me with good deals. I said, "How much money did you make for me last year?" And he said, "I made $80,000 for me last year." I said, "Well, I was making at that point I was making 55,000. This was 4 years into my job as an engineer." I'm like, "Well, fuck that. I'm just going to sell stuff to myself. You know, I'll be a real estate agent for myself. I'll make $80,000, make more money than I was making, as an engineer. And how hard could this be? I mean, I was actually selling things. I was working in a sales engineering position because I like sales. So I'm like, I can do better than this guy. So I went and got my real estate license, and I was sitting. We used to go in class then. I don't know if people still do that. So I was sitting in class, and I was just like, this is going to be like stealing candy from a baby. These people are idiots. But they just the truth is that real estate agency is kind of the it's kind of the collection of the lost.
That's very well said. Yes.
The island of misfit toys, right? That's
yeah. There's people like, for instance, like me, who are like focused business people from day one. I knew exactly what I was going to do, and then there are people who are useless. I would say if there's 60,000 agents, probably 5,000 decent agents, and the rest are just useless. They can't show a property correctly. They can't do offers correctly. They can't present offers. They don't research, and they don't farm. They don't do anything right. They just fall into transactions. Anyway, so that's how I got into sort of the sales thing. Mm-hmm. And then I was living in Oakville,
okay,
my parents' house at the time, until I was 30, and I was saving money. So I had about $1 million to my name by the time I was 30. Wow. And some of the assets were condos. I actually had 2 or 3 condos in downtown Toronto, and I had one in Mississauga, like high-rise condos. And so I had to sell one. I bought one for $170,000, and I had a 9-month closing, and there was an existing mortgage of $165,000 on the condo. So I only needed 5,000 to close, and it was an assumable mortgage. So I called this guy by the name of Harry Stinson, who was at the time he was calling himself condo specialist, I think.
Right.
And I met him, and he's a crazy man. He showed up to the listing presentation. I was waiting outside in a 24-foot red, like scarlet red, Senator stretch Cadillac limo. And he was driving it himself. And he came out in a white cotton tracksuit that had stains on it. These massive waffle runner Nike trainers, like the early editions of those Nike running shoes with the big waffle trainer, you know?
Yeah.
And he had a suitcase phone, which I'd never seen, because this was 1987. And portable phones were starting.
Where was this condo? Was it like Harbor Square or Bay Street or something?
No, it was Jarvis. It was a building called the Quarters, which was a fucking horrible part of town. The hookers used to hang out at the Harveys.
Hooker Harveys, yeah, well known.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I actually lived across from Hooker Harveys because the first condo I bought downtown was the corner of Gerrard and Jarvis. And every time I went home intoxicated, I would get hassled by hookers. You know, it was very intimidating. Anyway, so I sold that condo, and I sold for $255,000, and before it closed, I made like, I don't know, $75,000-$80,000. And I said to him, look, I want to sell real estate. I'm going to quit my job. I'll come and work for you. He was a one-man band, but he was the only guy that I noticed at all working in Toronto that specialized pretty well only in condominiums. And I just knew from, you know, looking at a city, like, it's going to be high rise. It has to be. Right. You can't be all these houses. You know, you can't build houses at the corner of Gerrard and Jarvis. It doesn't make sense. So I just decided to specialize in that. And I was probably the first person to truly only focus on that in a big way. And I started with Harry, and we after a few years we partnered together. We made a lot of money, but he then he got off on this development bent, and this was in like 1990, 1991. And the economy was still in recession, and there were lots of great properties to buy, to develop, but you couldn't sell them. Nobody was buying anything. And so everything he touched failed, and it was just mostly what he touched failed. And I just got disillusioned with him wasting. In the end, what happened is we were partners. So he asked me to be his partner 2 years into it, where we worked together with a couple of assistants. And, you know, we sold like just a shit ton, like 250, 280 condos a year, 400 rentals.
Wow.
We made a ton of money. Yeah. But he also had another side to his office because he and I made a lot of noise in the industry. We were kind of the people that everyone knew. And he had about 35 other people working in the office just as agents. And I said, look, after doing that for 5 years, I said, I'm going to go do my own thing. And I started Brad J. Lamb Realty, Inc. And I started that with myself, my dad, actually.
Really? That's cool.
Yeah, my dad had retired from being a pilot at Air Canada at 60, and he wanted to work with me, or work for me, I guess, selling real estate. So I had 3 agents myself. I had a bookkeeper, a personal assistant, and a reception. And I started Brad J. Lamb Realty in 1995. So I guess it was actually about 7 years with him.
And where was that office located, the original one?
It was at the foot of Bay Street down by Queens Quay.
Now, something that I've noticed, because I'd say probably 70% of my business as well is resale condos in downtown Toronto. That's, you know, I started in rentals. I'm now 10 years into my career, and we do a lot in CO1 and CO8. That's kind of our bread and butter, similar to where your office is and things like that. But something that I've always noticed is that in the city of Toronto, I don't necessarily think a lot of people buy condos because they love condos. It's like, well, they're great investments. First-time home buyers can afford them. Downsizers are a great alternative. And then there's a luxury market, right? But when you started selling condos, were people even interested? Like, who was buying them in 1995, 1997? Was it first-time home buyers, or was it strictly investors then as well?
Well, so the investor market was always something that was there. It was more like I would say native-born Canadians, like white Canadians
Sure.
that were buying things in Toronto. It wasn't as multicultural then as is today. It's more ethnic buyers, I'd say. But it was hard, right? Like a condo listing, we'd have them for 9 months,
Mm.
and the negotiations were protracted. Like I would carry in 1990, I would carry over 250 listings for sale, just Harry and I. And it was a job every week calling everybody because they were crying. Why? It's like it could take a year to sell a condo, and the job was just hold on to the listing, calm them down, and then get a price reduction.
Right.
Hold on to the listing, calm them down until you find the price, right? And so it was difficult, but there weren't many people doing it. And so listen, it's funny because I remember being 24 and visiting a friend of mine downtown, and he lived in a studio at the Summit. Do you know the Summit?
Is that 801 King or 725?
Yeah, it's 725.
Yeah, okay.
It's 701 to 725.
Yeah.
It was the only thing here in 1990 in the West End. It was the only thing. And it was full of strippers, hookers, and, ball players, a lot of baseball players. Because it was the only downtown, fully luxurious, and it was a fantastic place. Like the pool in the back was like you were in fucking Miami Beach, And I remember going there, and I came home and I said to my dad, I was living at home saving money because I wanted to, be rich, and I invested everything I could, and I said, can you front me the rent's $800 a month? Can you front me $800 a month for a few months? I can live in this building. Because it looks great. It just looks like a lot of fun. He goes, no, I'm not lending you anything. You have to do it all on your own. But I wanted to live in a high-rise building. And I saw myself, when I was a young guy, I visualized myself living in a condo. And I visualized the finishes of the condo, and I visualized who I would be. When I was living at my parents' house from 22 to 30, hating every minute, but knowing I was doing the right thing because I saved money and I ended up being independently wealthy by 30. But I gave up a lot, And I used to go to bed visualizing, oh man, I'm going to get this condo and it's going to have gray carpet. And I'm going to have like black marble tile and I'm going to have a black leather couch. And I dreamt of all this stuff, of what I was going to achieve at a certain point. And then I did it, So I think there were people like me back then that really aspired to living in a condo, thought as a cosmopolitan playboy lifestyle, and I think and we sold a lot of units to young women, young men, and older people that were moving out of houses. But you got to realize the product in the late 80s was shit.
Okay.
It just wasn't what it is. The stuff today is infinitely better than it was back then.
One thing that you brought up the Summit. So the Summit's one of the buildings that doesn't have balconies, right? So can you walk me through why was that those early condos in Toronto didn't have balconies? Was like the green room or the sun room like all the trend and then that went out of trend?
Well, so back in the 70s and 80s, the city of Toronto didn't. So if you could build a balcony, and then you could enclose the balcony, and if the balcony was enclosed and not heated, then they would call it an enclosed balcony. Oh. And so developers would then put it in the floor plan and sell it and get an extra 80 square feet. So it was a way of squeezing the margin a bit. And then the city cottoned onto it and said, you can't do that anymore. That's bullshit. And so then you saw these enclosed solariums go away. But throughout the 80s, all the buildings on Bay Street and, in the St. Lawrence Market area and pretty well anywhere, had these large substantive solariums that could really serve as a den or a bedroom. But they caught that loophole.
It was something I was chatting with Steve about this on a previous episode. Is that we had a listing down on Harbor Square recently, and I've only ever done a few in that building, and it was a 46-year-old building. Now, location's amazing. It looked at the water, but a 46-year-old building that my client had owned 2 years into it being built, like almost from the beginning. Yeah, she was selling it. We sold it in 9 days. And price per square foot, it was still like almost $900 a square foot for a 46-year-old building. So there's something to be said about even these older condos with the new ones with the price gap and the price per square foot you're paying. If they're located well, they're still moving, even with the higher maintenance fees. Like, are you seeing that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not plugged into the comings and goings of specific buildings like I was, but listen, the older buildings are the best located buildings because they were the first ones to go, right?
Right.
So, like Harbor Square is a great building. It's a great complex. The units are very spacious, and there's going to be a discount. The discount's probably too large. I think there's probably good value in buying, 900 a foot. You could listen. There's a company that bought the Harbor Castle Weston.
Okay.
I think they're called Randy River or something like that. Anyway, they're a hotel management company. They own the Hilton as well. And that property, if they developed a condo there, they would be selling those units for $2,000 a foot.
Oh, easy.
Right.
Easy.
So there's I mean, if you look at Harbor Square, like it has a very gracious lobby, a very amazing set of facilities. Like you don't get indoor pools like that anymore. And just a phenomenal facility floor. 55, 65 Harbor Square is even better with facilities. And the lake views are unbelievable. And one bedroom is like 1,100 square feet.
Yeah, they're actually generous sizes.
Yeah. I think those buildings are great.
Okay, so I want to now fast forward. Let's talk about condos today. What's your outlook on the condo market now moving forward? Condos have had an interesting few years where did very well in 2019. And I'm talking more resale in this conversation. Did very well in 2019, dropped off 10 to 12% in 2020, jumped up again in 2021, and then we all know what happened last year with the entire market. So it's weird where condo prices per square foot downtown are almost like, depending on the building, like late 2019 prices, which sounds bad, but it's better than 2020 and better than 2022. What's your outlook on just condos downtown?
Well, so the thing about real estate, and it's pretty true in any city, is that you have a cycle, a true up cycle that lasts maybe 3 years, and then the government or the economy or some fucking thing happens that COVID or a change in government, like the Wynne government, that was a
Right.
horrible government. Or you have like banking meltdown or like the things that aren't directly related to why real estate should be valued a certain way. It happens about every 3 years. And then you have like this disruption for 18 months and everybody thinks, oh my God, like, I'm going to get this amazing deal or prices are going to collapse. You get all these people. I've heard this. I've been active since 1982 in the Toronto real estate market. And prior to that, I was someone who was following it very closely. It's the same. So here's what's going to happen. Prices are going up. They're going up. And they're going to go up higher than they were before. So I'll give you an example. I fully expect a 500 square foot apartment to be priced at $1 million in like 5 years.
New construction?
Anything.
Really, eh?
Expect it. But I mean, so new construction leads the way. So, why there's a bit of a gap in new construction, a little bit of a gap. It didn't used to be that way. Actually,
yeah, it was the opposite, right?
Yeah, it used to be a bit cheaper. But now, because there's not enough product for the people that want to buy it, and there never will be, real estate prices are just going up. Like, I read the other day that this guy, Furtado Tillman, I think is his name. He owns the Houston Rockets, and he owns a large food restaurant chain, and he owns the Golden Nugget in Las Vegas. He just bought a property on the main drag in Vegas for $270 million US. It's 6 acres. He paid 100 times more than the previous transaction for the Aria. I don't know if you know Las Vegas at all.
Yeah.
And where the Aria is, but the Aria is part of the big MGM development, right? Paid 100 times more for in a city that has no water, right?
Right.
So this is the thing people need to realize. Like, there's not enough land where people want to live.
I think that's the big thing, where people want to live, right? Because we have land, but we're obviously not. We all want to live in certain areas.
Yeah, but think of this. We're also entering to the subdivision market shortly with a 800 home subdivision. And it costs for us to service this, it's going to cost us $25 or $30 million to service a 100-acre parcel, right? And that's in the middle of fucking nowhere. It's in Creemore.
Okay.
It's not in the middle of nowhere, but it's a small town. So to make infrastructure, water, power, sewer, roadways, it's expensive. And that's why when you go up to Markham, those buildings are $1,400 a foot because you can't do it cheaper.
Well, that's the thing, right? And when we look to the future and we look at the new developments coming based on, and I'm sure, you can fill us in a lot more than we know on this as a developer, but I mean, what the city is asking for in development charges and how long they take to get back to you guys. I'm sure you could just rant on this for an hour, but it's not easy for you guys to just have an idea, build, and then sell it and make a reasonable profit and move on. I'm sure that's been a headache since you started the development side.
Yeah, no, it's gotten way worse. So yeah, being a real estate developer working in Toronto is a very tough gig.
Yeah.
You have to have extremely deep pockets. You have to have the will of steel. You have to be a very optimistic human being. And so only certain people, certain personality traits or types can survive as a developer in the city. This is the toughest city, I think, in the world to develop in. There's lots of competition. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of, because it's so busy, our city is very arrogant.
This episode of the Tom Storey Show is brought to you by the Storey team at LePage Signature in Toronto, Ontario. The Storey team focuses on satisfying all of their clients' wants and needs when either buying or selling real estate in the GTA. But don't take my word for it. They have way over 100 five-star reviews on Google from clients singing their praises after amazing home purchases and sales. From downtown Toronto condos to semis to detached homes, whatever your needs, Tom and his team promise to provide an educated, honest, and transparent approach to helping all of their clients achieve their financial and personal goals through real estate. So there is no need to search bus benches or newspaper ads anymore to find the right agent for you. Just visit www.storeyteam.ca to book a call with the Storey team today. That's StoreyTeam.ca. That's StoreyTeam.ca. This communication is not intended to cause or induce breach of any existing agency agreement.
In Toronto, they're like, well, we don't fucking care about this. It's
right.
There's tons of guys in lineup. Just what makes you special, right? And frankly, I get it because Toronto is the fastest growing city in the world. And I don't consider China part of the world. And I'll tell you why. Because China is a command economy. It's controlled by a Politburo. It's not controlled by market forces. It's controlled by 9 men. So those 9 men determine what cities grow and what cities don't. And sometimes they build cities and there's no people in the cities. Our market here is entirely market driven. And there's no city in the world like Toronto. There's over 140 cranes, and there has been for 10 straight years. No other city in the world has anywhere close to this number of cranes. And you could say maybe Dubai sometimes does, maybe. But again, Dubai is a command economy. It's run by a ruler who decides, I'm going to borrow from my cousin and build a new city. And, it'll work out somehow.
Sorry, go on.
Well, so if you look at any city in Europe or North America or Australia or Africa or South America, Central America, there's no place like Toronto. There's more cranes here. In fact, there's more cranes here than Los Angeles, New York City, Chicago, and Seattle. All those combined, we have more cranes here. And so just to kind of finish up on that question you asked me, the only thing that's going to happen to prices in Toronto is they're going to go up. That's the only thing that's going to happen. There's absolutely no situation where it's going to change. Government doesn't have enough money to, in the medium term, long term, stop it. They can create policies to try to slow it down, but it won't stop it.
Yeah, which
Because
they have, obviously, lots.
Yeah, but there's, so if you are, there's two sides to this. There's immigration, and there's a housing shortage, and the pressure from a liberal mindset. You see what's happening in the United States. The liberal mindset is let as many fucking people in your country as possible, probably because they'll vote liberal or Democrat, right? Well, our prime minister has exactly the same attitude. Let in 550, but the real number is a million.
We've seen that.
Yeah. But let 550,000 people in, yet we can build 100,000 homes.
There was a chart recently that showed the million people coming in and that the new housing starts are at the lowest they've been in a decade. And it's just like, okay, well, how do we think this is going to play out?
It's going to play out as a disaster. It's going to play out exactly as it has in other cities where housing is a problem, like London and Paris and Hong Kong and Singapore and New York. It's a problem. And it'll be the government will create ways to penalize ownership, but they won't stop it. They can't. But I mean, the funny thing is they want purpose-built housing built, right?
Yeah.
And so condominiums really are, at the end of the day, purpose-built housing.
That's what they become.
Yeah, well, that's what they are when you sell them. You sell them to investors pretty well. And so what they're upset about that is that at any time, the owner can say, get out, I want to sell my condo. That's why they don't like it, right? But what they don't realize is that condo buyers have a different financial model than a pension fund. A pension fund needs a 3.5, 4, 5, 6 cap on an apartment building, which is impossible to achieve in Calgary. It can be done.
Okay.
I don't know any other city, maybe Winnipeg. I don't know, maybe Edmonton, but it cannot be done in Vancouver, Montreal, Toronto, Ottawa, Hamilton. Can't be done in any of these cities where your prices are north of $1,000 a foot. It can't be done. So we have a crisis that's not going to be alleviated. They need to promote condominium housing and as much condominium housing as possible.
I want to bring Steve in here. So I didn't formally introduce you guys before we started talking here, and I know I've kind of asked a lot of questions, so I want to bring Steve in. So Brad, Steve is in Surrey, so like 45 minutes outside of Vancouver. Steve, are you seeing the same thing in Surrey, which would be like a suburb of Vancouver with condos? Are condos now really building up and there's new ones coming, or is it all just happening in Vancouver?
Oh no, so we kind of have the largest growing city here in Surrey, in the province, right? Growing faster than Vancouver. And so everything is just high rises. They're handing out high rises like crazy. They're actually handing out high rises so fast in Surrey that they're not building them to code, which is another whole issue. But that is definitely the way it's going. And like you mentioned, it's the same thing. It's pre-sale, it's investor. And that's where the future is. And just this week, our NDP government has announced that they are planning to, and everything they've announced, they've done, they're getting rid of the single family zoning. It is now province-wide. So
Seriously?
That means not rid of. What they're doing is blanket up zoning the province. So every single family home in the province, you will be able to create 3 structures.
Is that not what we need in Toronto too, Brad?
That's like a Band-Aid on a dike. Right? It's, what we need is, so it's probably too late for Toronto, because my fight here is I want 12 stories and the city dies at 8. They fight for that, like 12 to 8. I'm like, I don't get it. What the fuck is 4 more floors? I'm not asking for 40. I'm asking for 12. You go to court and you fight about it, and it takes forever. Going to court, going to the Ontario Land Tribunal, it's from the time you apply, it takes you 3 years to get in there, and they get 4 months or 5 months to get a ruling, and it just, you're 5 or 6 years before you put a shovel in the ground. But what we need that easy zoning, like sure, 3 houses here and there in the area that chokes off Toronto, these single family home neighborhoods. But you're never going to convince a guy in Forest Hill that, that it's okay to build an apartment building next to his $10 million house. It's just not going to happen. And so, and that guy's not going to put a threeplex in his backyard because he's fucking got a $10 million house. He's like, I don't want these tenants in my backyard. So where it works is, and I think even in Toronto, in areas where someone has $2 or $3 million house, which is really a standard house now along the little roads that run off, our main avenues of, say, King and Queen and Dundas and so on. Like, I don't think everybody that has a house is going to be interested in that. I think maybe 1 out of 20 might, right? I mean, who wants a basement tenant in their house? Like, you do it if you need it.
I think Steve has one, but it's more common also in Vancouver than it is here.
It is.
I know, but I'll tell you this. What happens is, I don't know, Steve, what your affluence level is, but I know there's a point where you get to an affluence level where, like, I don't fucking want to see that tenant, and I don't want them knocking on my door because I got to change a light bulb.
Yeah.
I don't want that. I'm gonna make that into like a games room, and we'll play poker down there, right? So I get it. There's a point, but there's an affluence level, and the problem in Toronto is these houses where they're talking about doing it, they were $200,000 houses 20 years ago, 25 years ago. They're now $2.5 million houses, and someone buying a $2.5 million house is making $500,000 a year, and they don't want, and they've probably a lawyer and a doctor, and they don't want to see that fucking guy, poking his head out when they're having a party in the backyard. They just don't. So I think that you'll see some of this happening, but it's not the pill that solves the problem. What solves the problem, as fast as we can, is to allow density easier. So to that point, I have fought the city on almost every file in court that I have. And now 5 out of 5 files that I'm working on, file meaning a development. These are big developments, 300, 400 units. The city has agreed with me. Initially, they said no over our dead body. And then after 6 months or 8 months of me saying, well, I'm not sure, this is what I'm doing, they asked me for some small little kind of thing that makes them, I guess, feel okay about the file. And then we get it done. And so I think there's really now an urgency and an understanding that they've shit the bed. And now they got to fix it. Now, the problem is there's no more land here. Now the next deals are, assemblies that cost $50 million or buying a half an acre for $200 million. Like, think of that, $200 million. You need $80 million cash to do that deal. That's not a little small developer. That is a big-time multinational developer. That's the game it is today. And that's what we're at now. And of course, if you're paying $200 million for the land, the condos are 1,700 foot, right?
Yeah.
They're not really affordable anymore.
But what you're, hang on, let me jump in.
Yeah.
What you're saying here is when you go to the city right now and you say, okay, I want to do 12 stories, for the longest time they've said 8. Shouldn't they be coming to you and go, okay, now it's 18?
Well, yeah.
But shouldn't they be coming to you and say, please fix our problem? Brad is someone that can help fix our problem right now. Why is there still pushback?
I wish you worked at the city.
I'm smarter than that.
The reason why there's pushback is because behind the piece of property that I bought are 10 $2 million single-family homes, and they're on the phone with the counselor saying, fuck this, we don't want this, this is terrible, they're going to look in our backyard. I mean, you think this is what I would think, right? If I was a consumer and I saw, Dundas Street and I see 8-story buildings being built, I wouldn't buy the house right next to the back of that lot because I know that or I'd buy it knowing that, right? But these people think they're getting something for nothing. So they bought the lot for 25% less than the guy next door. And now they want to be protected. Well, the point is, you bought the lot. It's like buying near an airport, right? And then screaming about the airplanes. Well, the problem is that politicians need to get reelected. And so it's a constant fight with local taxpayers and councillors.
I've got a story about that for my place. So my house is built in 2004, and they tore out like half of this historic acreage. And so then they built they took out all these acreages. They just put in 6,000 square foot lots everywhere. And then a chunk of that farm gets resold off, I want to say 5, 6, 7 years later, and they're going to develop it into more houses. And then the people that moved in literally like 3 years ago fought against the redevelopment of that portion, right? To not cut down the trees. But where they just cut down the trees 3 or 4 years ago for their house, that's fine.
Of course,
so that's going to happen no matter where you are, right?
Yeah, you got yours, right? Once you get yours, man, fuck everybody else. That's what people think, and it's not the right attitude, but it is the human attitude, and that's not going to change. So the problem is so in Toronto, and by the way, Vancouver, there's no solution. The solution is going to be terrible. The solution is going to be just like New York and Paris, where people struggle. They struggle.
Mm-hmm. Or it's just going to become renting is just the norm.
Yeah. You're gonna be like, I don't know, whenever I'm in London or Paris, I see all these buildings and they're like low-rise 5-6 story buildings and they're rental. I'm like, I wonder who owns those buildings.
Yeah,
there's tons of them, right? They're landlords. I don't know who owns them. Probably corporations and individuals have had them for 100 years, right? They're wealthy families that have kept them. I just think what's going to happen is you're going to have a landlord class. These are people that get up early and did the work to and you're getting a lot of people probably complaining about that comment, but the bottom line is people end up buying homes. You know, those are the people that probably did something to make the effort to get in the market when it was probably difficult. And then there are people that sat by and didn't.
Right. And
those people that sat by and didn't will likely be tenants forever. But there is a solution for those folks. There will be rent controls in most cities to some extent. And, you know, what they need to do is allocate their monthly funds as if they own a home. So if owning a home was $4,000 a month and renting is $2,500, they take that extra $1,500 and they invest it, right? And if they do that and they do it religiously, then they'll probably not be wildly different off than the person that bought the house. But the problem is they don't. They see, hey, I got $2,500 in my bank account. I'm going to go to Cancun and then spend the money. And they live hand to mouth. And that's the problem with being a tenant, is that you don't think about that. You know, we don't get trained in any country. Nobody tells you how to be a smart business person, how to save money, and how to end up with assets at the end of your life. Nobody teaches you that. They should, but they don't. And that's the problem with being a tenant. Most tenants don't follow that plan, and they end up requiring government assistance or company pensions to survive.
This episode of the Tom Storey Show is brought to you by Lendlord. If you've not heard of Lendlord, it is a software platform designed for real estate investors. It helps you easily track your portfolio and get reminders when things like rent and utility payments are due. But the best feature and my most favorite feature of the entire platform is something called a deal analyzer. This is where you, as a real estate investor, can log into the software, plug in your future potential purchase, and the system quickly comes up with important information like cap rate, cash on cash return, and even future potential values. It's a totally free software, but listeners of the Tom Storey Show can get 90 days of the upgraded paid version right now totally for free by either clicking the link down below in the description or going to lendlord.io/TomShow. And if you're a real estate agent and you're not using this software to quickly and efficiently analyze deals for your clients, well, I think you're doing your clients a disservice. Download Lendlord today for a quick and easy way for you to analyze not only your own future purchases, but those of your clients. So again, that's lendlord.io/TomShow to sign up right now, and listeners of the Tom Storey Show receive 90 days of the paid version totally for free. I have tried this software myself. I think it's fantastic and extremely useful as a real estate investor. Sign up today. That's lendlord.io/TomShow. And now back to the podcast.
Brad, I wanted to tell you a quick story. I went to the launch when you launched the Harlow. This must have been 2015, maybe. maybe. And I was in that room and I was like a year in the business, like literally went just to see how these things worked. And I remember you like stood up, introduced everybody, and then you kind of said something along the lines of, prices start at $650 a square foot. And there was all this like whispering between each other, like $650 a square foot, like that one over there is only $500 or resales $450. And then fast forward 5 years, the building's done. What's it selling at now? $1,200 maybe.
Yeah.
So when you had made the comment earlier of, 500 square foot being $1 million in 5 years sounds insane until it happens, right? So is that just going to be but that's not that a lot. The amount of time that passed from you launching that project at $650 a square foot to whatever your next launch is going to be, if it were in a similar location, that growth is kind of scary, no? How much more expensive it's become?
Yeah. So, when you go from $100 to $200 a foot, that's the same as 500 to 1,000 in terms of percentage, right?
Right.
The problem is now that, so the numbers are huge. And I think it is daunting for some people. I think the issue is that we've had inflation in all things when it comes to real estate. So the city went from no development fees to like $60,000 a door. Right? They went from no Section 37 charges to Section 37 charges being 4% of your land value. Land values are high, right? So that's high. They went from park levies at 5% to pretty well everywhere 10% of your land value. So if you have a $50 million piece of land, paying $5 million to the city for a parks levy. So just that plus the HST, like the HST when we were at $400 or $500 a square foot. The HST was a good thing. We were getting about 3 or 4% back as a reclamation based on their calculation of HST. But there was up to $400,000. It was a clawback, right?
Right.
Still is. But what sells for $400,000 now? So on my pro forma now, where I used to have a 4% clawback on HST. It's now 13. It's basically 13% because our stuff is pretty well all $1 million or more, like 800,000, 600,000, whatever. But the average price is probably 900 to $1 million, and so basically you're getting no HST back, maybe 1% or 0.5%. So there's been inflation in all the hidden things, and then the cost of building has gone from like I built Harlow at $160 a foot. Now my buildings cost $425 a foot. 300% increase, wow. 250% increase in the cost of building. And land prices have gone from $50 a square foot to $200, or $40 a square foot to $200. So, and there's no land, right? And why that is because now you have to buy a tower, 20-story building, knock it down to build a 50-story building. And so the land price is just very, very high. So we've gotten to the point where we're like New York City. I often said that when there were no more parking lots, and I think if you drive around Toronto now, you realize there used to be 1 million parking lots. Land had no value. It's like I bought my first parking lot for $4 million. And that parking lot today would be worth 50 or 60. $4 million, right? I had $1.5 million to buy my first development property. $1.5 million is all I needed to buy that land. And now I would need 15 or 18 to do the same, 20 to do the same deal. So as we Manhattanize or Londonize or Parisize our city, there's no more land available and it's more expensive to do everything. And so prices have jumped. And we're going to get, I bought a condo in Manhattan in 2008, right after the crash. I bought a 800 square foot, 1 bedroom in Chelsea, brand new from floor plans for $730,000. It was like $900 a foot.
Yep.
And previously, that building had been advertised at around $1,100 a foot. So the developer dropped his prices to sell it during a recession. I sold that condo for $1,500 a foot in 2014, and now that condo is $2,200 a foot. Now, it actually looks like Harlow. It's a similar kind of building to Harlow. It's a mid-rise red brick and so on.
Yeah.
In New York City, you're paying 2,500 US to 35,000, 40,000 US, depending on the location for a condo. And the number of transactions is much less in Toronto. And so as Toronto matures, what's going to happen is far less development will happen. There just won't be stuff to do. Like, look at the waterfront. It's almost done, right?
Right.
The east patch there is almost done. The only real big piece of real estate left is the Portlands. And I think that's going to be about 50,000 units at best. I think it was 30, and now they're going to probably increase the density to 50. But 50,000 units will be absorbed in 3 or 4 years. And then what are you going to do?
Yeah.
If you want to live in Toronto, you want to come here. I think that the development industry is going to slow down to what it is in New York, where builders can do one building. Guys that are doing 2,000 units a year right now are going to be doing 400 a year because there won't be opportunities. But the margins are much higher and the profit's much higher because you're at 2,500 a foot, not 500 a foot, right? So you might be able to do as well doing less buildings, but that's the future of Toronto. There's not going to be the same number of transactions for sure.
No, we just don't have the land, right? Or unless you're going to try and assemble houses, which is probably a big pain to do, it's going to be tough, right?
Everything I'm going to tell you, if you go up and down Richmond, College, Dundas, King Street, all of it, I've done it. There's nothing. It's all in the hands of guys like me, all of it.
Is there anything to be said about developers holding on to properties for too long where they should have started developing, and the city's going to say to you guys, like, you have a period of time if you bought it for this purpose to bring more inventory? Is that a thing that happens? Do people land bank?
Well, so you have like family offices, which are really just sort of a family that maybe owns some warehouses or parking lots or whatever for 40 or 50 years. And they just, they came from Europe or something, or someplace other than, here. And they had this idea of like land should never be sold, right? It's like, the ability to buy land is a luxury. It's not a God-given right. And those people have made lots of money. There's some Chinese too that have done this. There's plenty of Chinese people who've been here 40 years at land bank. Those people aren't sophisticated developers. They don't know the politics of the policy that's taking place. And they're mistaken in land banking, because if you don't rezone, you will lose some of your rights. And a case in point, we had a ton of stuff over the years I'd bought. Very difficult for me to do it. I struggled mightily to put together a portfolio of 8 development sites that I land banked, substantive sites. It was about 40 properties I bought over a period of 12 years, and it was tough. It was tough. People want to lend you money and sometimes, and anyway, I did it. And I'm an active developer, so we had other things going on too, not just these land bank sites. And I heard about inclusionary zoning. Do you know what inclusionary zoning is?
It's the under 99, or if it's over 99 units, then you have to build a certain amount of properties for people for more affordable homes, right? And that cost will now go to the buyer of all the other units, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah. So you basically about 10%. It's an additional 10% cost to a development. And my philosophy was, look, I'm not in the low-income housing business. If you want me to be in the low-income housing business, pay me to do it, and I'll do it. Like,
right.
We can consult with the city and help them solve that problem. But you're not going to put a gun to my head and make me do it. So I took everything that we had that was kind of sitting, and in the end, it worked out to 14 developments. And in 1 year, we got them all into the system and grandfathered ourselves against this inclusionary zoning. Now, it's a very, very. I think it's a very punitive, to developers, and I don't think it's great for. I'm not a big believer in. If you work hard for your money, and you manage to squirrel away $100,000, miraculously having a $100,000 job or $80,000 job, could take you 15 years, right? Then you want to buy a condo. And you buy a condo, and then in the building is someone paying half the price for the rent. If the rent was 3,000 a month for that type of unit, they're paying 1,000 or 1,200 or something. I don't think that's fair to the person that worked their life to get money to buy in a building, and I don't think that's fair for that person. I just don't.
Who owns that unit? The inclusionary zoning units. Does the developer maintain it and then have to rent it out for less, or does the city then own that unit?
No, so the developer could opt to keep it. Most developers are selling to third-party organizations that buy them for 40 cents on the dollar.
Okay.
And manage them as rentals at a lower rate, right? It's not low income housing, but it's kind of a hybrid model that gets close to that. Now listen, there's a problem with homelessness. There's a problem with affordability. 100%. I understand that the city is trying to do everything it can to figure it out. I don't think that's the solution. I think there's a better solution than that. I think there's other things that can be done. That are going to be tough. I think that, I said this in a conference a few weeks ago. It should be borne by everybody. The problem with homelessness and the risk of being assaulted by homeless people is higher now than it's ever been. My wife was very close. She could have been killed. Massive homeless guy was moving towards her very quickly, and I wasn't there, and someone stepped in and helped. But he could have killed her. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
The bottom line is a society, all of us need to contribute to make this problem better or less of a problem. And we also need to contribute to allow for people that can't afford to live in market value homes to get assistance. And how that works is everybody needs to pay their fair share. And I don't think making, 300 condo buyers in one particular building front that bill being fair. I don't think that's fair. And it's certainly not fair given that, several 100,000 people have bought already and never had to pay that, right? It's an unfair tax. So I think what we need to do is tax everybody, maybe a surtax on property taxes, and and build this stuff through like a public collection plate, not that kind of targeted collection. That's my thought anyway.
Yeah, no, that's definitely an interesting breakdown. I've never actually thought about it that way. I knew, when the city announced inclusionary zoning, it was very much like, look at us, look what we've done. This sounds really good. But if you actually break it down, a small portion of people are paying for it, and then it will just make every new development cost more money. Like at the end of the day, that's what's happening here, right? Unless I'm wrong on that.
No, it's going to add. It's just going to add inflation to housing. It's going to help us get closer to that $2,000 foot. And the funny thing is, there's this idea that real estate's unfair, right? If you if you're lucky enough to buy a home, you won a lottery, and it's not fair that you won the lottery because somehow that life's not fair, right? Listen. Not anyone can buy a home, but lots of people that are in that choir of complaining could have, and they opted not to for some other reason. Yeah. So, I think that we want to do is, so what this does is this rewards people that already have a home, right? Like if the prices of new buildings go to $2,000 a foot, if you already have one, without inclusionary zoning, you could even say yours is worth more because you don't have, affordable housing in your building, right?
Yeah, that's interesting too.
So I understand it. They see politicians, this is a huge problem for politicians, housing, and they're all struggling to find a solution. None of them are that smart, right? So they don't really know what to do, and so. This seems like something that will help people get elected, right? They'll say, well, look, as a city politician, we advocated for inclusionary zoning, but we're doing what we can. But it's going to do nothing.
Brad, speaking of things that will help people get elected, we have a 2-year foreign buyer ban in Canada. Is that going to change anything?
No.
I think I know your answer, but
No, because we didn't have a so all what it's going to do is it's going to piss off this country needs affluent investors. If you can afford to buy if you want to come to Canada and do business here and you want to buy some kind of residence, we want those people here, right? They're going to drop some money and employ people. There's this illusion that there's this massive foreign buyers that are soaking up all the condos that the locals can't buy now. But the truth is this, when you went to that Harlow launch, like we used to do launches like that. It was brutal, right? Fucking brutal. Like there was, 240 units in Harlow. That launched that one day, big blowout, we probably sold 50. Right? And it took me a year and a half to sell that building to be able to build it. And we gave the locals that really wanted to buy real estate plenty of opportunity to buy real estate. They didn't want to. They don't want to. When we launch new projects and we put them out there, the tire kicker's like, oh, I don't know. It's like too much money. I'm not sure if, this is the right thing for us. And they don't do it, right? And lose the opportunity, forever losing the opportunity, forever, not stepping up and buying property. And so if you need rental housing, you need to sell these condominiums from floor plans. The only way we're going to get these done, we have to sell them from floor plans to get financing in this country to build these buildings. Unlike the States, you can build on spec. So we have to build these this way. And if we have to sell them quickly, because also if you don't sell them quickly, projects get a stink. And nobody wants to buy them. Like, well, why isn't that selling? It must be shit, right?
Yeah, they think something's wrong with it.
Yeah, so you got to sell them fast, right? Or you stick around forever trying to sell them. So the thing is, it's kind of weird because what we need is more condo apartment buildings built to help with the housing shortage. Yet where they think those buyers are coming from, they're turning the faucet off. The truth is, they're not foreign buyers anyways. So I don't think it's going to have much of an effect.
And I always thought with the foreign buyer comment that the people that would know the best would actually be in your shoes, the developers that would see the international down payment structure being different, that you guys were the only ones that would actually know what percentage was coming from outside Canada, because the rest of us were just guessing.
We have no buyers from outside Canada.
Interesting.
None, zero.
Interesting. Wow. I thought it would be at least like a little bit, so that's surprising.
No, and you're right. Our lenders want 25 or 35% down. It's a pain in the ass. We don't need to sell to foreign buyers. We've got a lot of the buyers are Asian, Indian, Russian, Middle Eastern. Now when I say that they're Canadians, but their heritage is from that region, and it's probably an 85% kind of number that comes from those regions. And I'm going to tell you, it's because the new Canadians come here and they can't believe taxis aren't something you really get into anymore. But when I used to ride in taxis, all the taxi drivers knew me. They knew my face, they knew who I was, and they always chat me up. And I used to have a lot of outdoor advertising, garbage cans and billboards and stuff, and did sort of funny advertising. And I would always ask them, I'd say, so how long have you been here? Oh, I've been here 25 years, sir. And I'm like, and do you have a house? Oh, yes, I own a house. I'm like, do you have any kids? I have 3 kids. My wife works here, and I do this, and I also have another job. And he goes, but also, Mr. Lamb, I have an investment property. Like, you have an investment property. You drive a taxi, you have a second job, your wife works, your 3 kids. What about your kids? Oh, they all go to university. I'm like, wow. They go to university, you own a house, and you have an investment property. How did you do that? Well, Mr. Lamb, we struggled. We gave things up. We struggled. We took in tenants to our home. We struggled. We saved. We didn't travel. We didn't go out for dinner. We did all the things to get here. And now I have a house. And Mr. Lamb, I'm looking for another investment property. Can you help me, or do you know of something that you can recommend? And I would get this every night when I would go out on a Thursday or Saturday, and I'd get in a cab. Every night I'd have a driver, because often taxi drivers were from new Canadians, because it's an easy job to get. Some of them were doctors, You know, it was just
Yeah.
a shame.
Yeah.
And smart people, and figuring it out to be a new Canadian, right? And that's what we need. Like these are the people who are building Toronto and Vancouver.
Yeah.
These are the people doing it.
Because I was thinking, if someone's listening to this and let's say they're, 22 and they're still living at home and they're looking at the prices and being like, I don't know how I'm ever going to make this work. Prices today aren't what they were before, but that conversation can always be had into the future and into the past, right? And I think the lesson that I learned here is that Brad Lamb lived with his parents till he was 30. If he can do it, you can probably do it too. Put away your money, save up, don't be an idiot with your spending, and you can do it. But you're not going to love your first property, but it'll help you get in and then go up from there. Ride the property ladder from there. Get in and wait.
Yeah, not only that. So the first property I bought was with my two brothers. And I didn't live in it. I rented it. I bought it for $32,000. I rented it for $750. We put about $5,000 down. It carried, which is harder to do these days. But it was in London, Ontario. I lived in Toronto. I had to drive out to London all the time to collect the rent. You have to sacrifice. So today, think of this. You can buy a $500,000 condo in London, Ontario, $300,000 condo in London, Ontario, or St. Catharines, or a townhouse somewhere, and you get three people to get the money together, and you rent it, and you keep it for 5 years, okay? And in 5 years, you divvy up the money. You'll probably have enough money to buy one of your own in that town. Then you buy that one, and you rent it again, and then in another 5 years, you sell it. And so that 10-year period, you probably now have enough money to enter the market you want to. That's what you have to do. There's no people think that they should get a job, and because they have a job now, they can afford to buy a home. That's not how my parents did it. That's not how I did it. For me to actually feel that I was rich, just to admit that to someone, I'm rich. I'm 61. Okay, I've been working like a fucking dog since I was 22, and when I was I got a job at the local Loblaws type store at 15, and I worked from 15 to 19 before I went to university. I've always had a job. I was caddying twice a day in the summer. I did everything I could to get into the marketplace, and that's how it is. It's not going to be easy. If it was easy, everyone would have a fucking house. It's not easy. It's hard. And it bothers me when I hear people complaining about this and whining that they can never get in the market. You can get in the market. Give up some of your lifestyle, band together with a couple of people, save and struggle, and you'll find that at some point in your life, you can say, I've made it. That's how it works.
You know what's interesting, Brad, is, and I'm not saying this just because you're the guest today, but I had a listing presentation yesterday with two people who I grew up with. They bought Pre-Con at 11 Charlotte, and they were brothers. They lived together. They bought it together. They've now lived there for that building's 6 or 7 years old. Yeah. And they now want to sell it. They own it 50-50. They're both selling it, getting reapproved to buy with their soon-to-be wives. And that's why they can afford the house for $1.5 million, because they bought that 5 years ago. It just so happened to be one of your buildings, but I thought that timing was funny. I wanted to share that.
Yeah, but listen, this is how interesting that is. That was for $250,000, probably something like that. And they needed like 15% down, right? So that's like $45,000. So they each needed $22,000, and then they could have borrowed the rest. And so you have a down payment structure that the developers give you 2 years.
Yep.
It's literally like $500 a month for 48 months. Or sorry, $1,000 a month for 24 months. $1,000 a month for 24 months gets you into a condo in Toronto. It did back then. And I'm going to tell you, way back then, people said, oh, it's too expensive. You can't get in the market. $500 a square foot is madness, right? Yeah. They'll always say that. So it's just not a true anecdote, and I hear it all the time, and I hear it from government. And it's just a case of people whining about their life. And life's not easy, man. You got to make it. You got to make it. You got to make it on your own. You got to stand on your own 2 feet. Some people have a harder start in life than others, right? But everybody can make it if they're a fighter.
Steve, didn't you say that one of your cousins that lived outside Canada said that Canadians' pastime is not hockey or curling, it's complaining?
It's my uncle, yeah. Canadians' favorite pastime is complaining, because it is like he lived in Hong Kong for a long time, and it's like go down or put your head down, go to work over there. And here it's like bitch and whine about everything that's going on, right? Because we have, like, I'm in Surrey, we have a massive Punjabi population, and they get so much like racism and hate for the amount of hard work that they put in. They do. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, that guy was probably born on a farm in the Punjab somewhere that didn't have electricity, water, or toilet or nothing. And now that guy, through his hard work, owns his own house and who knows how many other rentals.
Yeah.
And then the guys that I went to school with just down the street here, you know, they're whining about not being able to get in the market because everybody else has bought up the real estate while they're in their job doing whatever, buying big screen TVs and, you know, making sure they took the family to Disneyland this year, which, by the way, I looked into that cost. I'm not doing it. Right.
No,
like it's
very
crazy.
Yeah.
It's
stupid.
So right. It's just a bunch of whining as far as I'm concerned, Brad. I think you're 100% right.
Yeah, no, it's too bad. It's too bad, but it is true.
Brad, I want to wrap this up with a quick question for you. You had the Big City Broker TV show on HGTV. You were kind of like the first one that did that. Now, like, do you watch these Netflix reality shows, or do you kind of sit there being like, this is ridiculous, I can't put myself through this? Do you like those shows?
No, I don't. So my wife loves those shows, and my oldest daughter loves those shows, and so she forces me to watch. So my show aired for 3 years, pretty well around the world, and then it got taken over by CanWest Global. It was Alliance Atlantis was the film company and TV company. It was taken over by CanWest Global. CanWest Global, they did it in 2008. It was a leveraged buyout. They went kind of tits up, bankrupt, and then it was taken over by Shaw. And so they did a reeval on all shows, Canadian content shows, and they decided that they were going to take a pause on our show. And that was the perfect time for me because I really had enough of it. And then my producers, they approached me one day on one of these 100 and some buildings I was selling, and they said, we want to do a show about you. They went to New York and they pitched a show to the New York HGTV, which I think was Selling New York, or one of the big shows, right? And they did it in London and Miami and LA. And
like $1 Million Listing?
Yeah, I think that was it. Anyway, it's a model from our show that they took there. It was a tedious, horrible experience. I would never do it again. And it's all made up.
Yeah.
Right? It's all everything you see in those shows is made up. All of it's made up. It's all contrived. It's so silly. There are some that I like. I'll tell you, there's one on the weekend I see. It's a guy in New Orleans. It's called anyway. He's a guy with a ponytail that loans money to people to renovate houses in the quarter. You know, the old quarter. And it's a great show because you see the renovation and the value add and so on. Those kind of shows I think are interesting. But these brokerage shows are just horseshit. I
mean, it's just reality TV. That's all it is. There's not even much real estate. It's just lunches and conflict over nothing.
Yeah, but nobody does that. Like, nobody,
I know.
Don't do lunches. When a busy agent in Los Angeles is not hosting a luncheon for other real estate agents. So, like, you got MLS, fucking look there, and, you know, that's how it happens. It's just funny that they set it up where everyone's wearing fantastic clothes and they're coming by and they're accomplishing zero work. You know,
yeah. I think some of them might not even have their real estate license. They're just like actors that didn't quite make it that are good for those shows, and they say what they need to say to make it happen, right?
Yeah, but what it does is it kind of gives our industry, I think, a bit of a bad.
I agree.
It's like we don't really work, you know,
and make a lot of money not working is what it looks like.
Yeah.
And on top of all of that, the things that happen in real estate are way more dramatic and ridiculous, but it's actually within the transaction, and it's not, you know, Susan fighting with Sharon about did she get that $10 million listing. It's what's actually going on in the transaction, but obviously you can't put that out there.
Can't put that out.
Yeah, and also offers aren't like they're prepared to go to $5 million, and then, you know, I goes back to 5.2, and you're like, yeah, done deal. What?
Yeah, paperwork doesn't exist.
Yeah, there's no paperwork. That's right.
I love it. Well, this has been fun, Brad. I really appreciate you coming on and joining us. I think our viewership is going to really enjoy this episode. I usually wrap up the shows by asking the guests like any final thoughts you want to share, anything that's on your mind. What's next for Brad Lamb?
Well, we're doing a massive expansion, and yeah, there's going to be lots of changes here. We're going to be getting into a lot of different things. We started a hotel brand. We have a new capital company, Lamb Capital Invest in other businesses. We have we have our own construction company that's expanding really quickly. Yeah, no, we're gonna become quite a thing. I mean, it's very exciting right now. It's happening. It took a long time to get here, and finally, I feel like we've arrived, and we're going to be doing some really. I mean, we've always built buildings. We're going to build a lot more buildings, but we're going to be doing some other things other than just buildings.
I get a sense you're a guy that's not really thinking ever about retiring. You don't like to have nothing going on, right? There's got to be a few wheels always turning.
You know, I heard Donald Trump on an interview the other day, and he said he has a couple of close friends that made their fortunes between 80 and 90. Imagine that, 80 and 90. Jimmy Patterson is like 93 or 96, and I read an interview from him the other day. Guy's sharp as a tack, right? I just don't get it. I don't understand why people in France are freaking out about retiring at 65 instead of 63. Who fucking wants to retire? What are you going to do?
Apparently, well, maybe France is pretty nice to live there. I guess maybe they've got a point, but no, I get it. I get what you're saying.
Red wine, eating cheese all day. You're going to put a gun to your head, man. It's not a way to live.
A term that I've said on this podcast before that I heard at a conference is that someone said they've been to a lot of real estate agents' funerals, but never a retirement party. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Better stop buying real estate, not just selling real estate. But that's probably a conversation for another day. Brad, thank you so much for joining the show. I hope everyone that's watching on YouTube and listening on the audio platforms enjoyed this episode. Brad, if people want to reach out to your company, Brad J. Lamb Brokerage, is there a specific site they go to or online following?
Yeah, I don't know those.
That's okay. Just type in your name to Google. I'm sure they'll find you, or they'll find your company.
Yeah, just if you Google Brad Lamb or Brad J. Lamb, you'll find me. Yeah.
We'll put some links down below.
We'll find them for you. We'll figure it out. Thanks, Brad. I really appreciate you being here. Thanks, everyone, for watching and listening, and we will see you next Sunday. Bye.
Thank you. All right, bye.
Awesome.
All right, just.